Well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. My name is Miles Friesen. I work for the City of Santa Monica in the Cultural Affairs Division. I'm delighted and honored to be able to introduce our... You not hearing me? All right, there we go. I'm not used to speaking into microphones. There we go. So I want to introduce our artist in residence, Debra Scacco. She has done 25 plus years of research-based practice examining cartography as an exercise of power. Her work lives at the intersection of ecology, history, and policy in the uncomfortable space where everything's connected. She recognizes that violence against water is violence against all living beings and recognizes the Los Angeles River as a manifestation of both colonization and also resilience. Her work, in dialogue with the work of many, hopes to help us move closer to recognizing ourselves as one small participant in a vast network of living systems, all equally important, with water at the heart. Scacco is the first civic-appointed artist in residence for the City of Santa Monica, and she's based in the City Yards for a project entitled Our City Yards. Her residency project traces the paths of natural and human-made resources, maintenance systems, and waste through Santa Monica and beyond, and highlights and uplifts the contributions, voices, and experiences of essential workers that are so often not seen to the continued functioning of this city. And we want to welcome her today, so thank you, Debra.
It's like so much longer of a walk than I thought it was. Thank you so much for being here. As Miles said, my name is Debra Scacco. I am the artist in residence at City Yards in both the water and resource recovery and recycling divisions. I'm really thrilled to be kind of hosting this conversation, bringing together Sunny Wang and Bob Ramirez. I have been researching water for a very long time, and one of the things that was so exciting to me about this residency at City Yards was the opportunity to work with folks like Sunny and really learn how cities function, and also to work with folks like Bob, who are really looking at sort of, I don't even know how to describe it, right? Like embodied ways of understanding water and land. So very briefly, I will introduce each of them. The format for tonight is going to be Bob will kick off with a presentation about Kuruvungna Springs. Sunny will follow up with a presentation about some of the work being done in Santa Monica around water, and then we'll have a conversation and a Q&A as well. So brief introductions. So Bob Ramirez, a native Californian. Bob Ramirez is both architectural designer and construction director of Ramirez Design Studio. His passion for the art of building and a love of adventure inspired him to explore the world in search of cultural enrichment. What began as a short trip grew into a multi-year exploration of indigenous cultures that were adapting to the modern world. His drafting skills and craftsmanship enabled him to work along the way and learn as an insider. Bob is the president of the Gabrielino Tongva Springs Foundation, a nonprofit established to preserve and protect the Kuruvungna Village Springs site located at University High School in Los Angeles. The foundation is a community organization dedicated to preserving the heritage site and educating the public about the history, as well as preserving the natural and cultural resources of the area. And I'm so thrilled to be in dialogue with Bob. We met at the Springs a couple of years ago, and I've been like trying to find a way to invite him to do something together. So this is a real honor. And then, of course, we have Sunny Wang. Sunny Wang is the Water Resources Manager at the City of Santa Monica, where he oversees both water and wastewater operations. He has more than 20 years of experience designing and implementing conventional and advanced water treatment technologies, including desalination and potable reuse around the world. He is also experienced in alternative delivery methods for water and wastewater infrastructure projects. He currently leads the city's effort to diversify its wastewater portfolio using innovative projects for potable reuse and concentrate recovery, as well as restoring local groundwater supplies through advanced treatment technologies. And I do have to say that Santa Monica, is it okay if I say, like just placed second in the Global Water Awards, which is a huge achievement. And is super exciting, and like Sunny will share more about the work that they're doing with SWIP, but it's just such an extraordinary project that really, I think, addresses some of the challenges of urbanization and the ways that we have done and undone nature, right? So with that, and I'll also just add, as a part of my residency in Santa Monica, I'm actually mapping where water comes from and goes, and where waste comes from and goes. So I think like these sort of conversations are also such amazing research and are such a gift to me. So thank you for sharing that with me. And with that, I will hand it over to Bob.
Thank you, Deborah, and thank you for having me at the City Hall Library. I prefer being outdoors, but this isn't bad. It's pretty lush, nice carpet, watery. So, how do I do this? Okay. People have been living here for 10,000 years, longer. But this is an image of what it might have been like. If you walk down to the beach or went to the lagoon, you could see the people with their grass huts. They call them keys. And their boats, plank canoes, they call them tiats. And they would paddle to Catalina Island and all the other offshore islands and exchange abalone shells, soapstone. There was extensive trade throughout this whole part of the world, the whole Southwest. And up into the inner parts of this country, you find abalone shells from Catalina. So when, let me see, there we go. This is a artist rendition of Westchester, Playa Vista. You can see Point Doom. Can everybody hear me? You can see Point Doom in the distance. And I love seeing the kids playing in the water and bringing materials to build the quay. So these people, as California became discovered by the Europeans, they thought that it was an island. This is a map from, I think, 1750s or a little bit earlier that depicts California as the land of Amazon warriors ruled by Queen Calafia. And interesting, the name California is actually from the Arabic, from the word that gave us caliphate. So it came from a 15th century Spanish novel. The word, it stuck. And now we're all living in a California, which is not an island anymore. In 1769, this gentleman was sent by the King of Spain to press his claim on California, which had been neglected for hundreds of years because it was very difficult to get to, the ocean currents going the wrong direction. The Russians actually were starting to come down from Alaska downstream, and that's when they decided to send this guy up. On August 4th, 1769, the Portola expedition spent the night at what is now called Kuruvungna on the grounds of University High School. It's a site located on Barrington between San Vicente and Santa Monica. This gentleman, this friar, Crespi, was along for the trip, and he noted the friendly nature of the natives that lived at Kuruvungna and how they presented him with gifts. They were unarmed, and they gave them water and cresses and sage. And this is the interesting mural that that's under discussion now in the Santa Monica City Hall that supposedly depicts this meeting at the springs. You could see Portola with his horse and his foot in the water, where unfortunately the natives, they don't have faces. They're not fully human yet, because I guess they were Gentiles and needed to be baptized and civilized. But there's the soldier and there's Crespi. And this is the origin story of Santa Monica. The natives were taken to the San Gabriel Mission, rounded up in the whole LA basin. And they became known as Gabrieleños as a result, those survivors, the ones that were baptized. My ancestors are actually buried in the mission, the little graveyard that's behind that big building. And I used this key, the shape from this painting, for inspiration for the key that we built at the Springs. This is the mission, how it looks today. And that's Father Sarah, who some people believe was a genocidal colonizer, and other people believe is a saint. So we can get into that next week. When the Mexican had a revolution, they got rid of the Spanish and they took all the land from the church that was promised to the Indians and divvied it up amongst their aristocratic brothers. And this land that we're on right here was given to this is the brother of Francisco Sepulveda, This is his brother. Francisco, I couldn't find a good photo, so I got his brother. But you get the idea. These were the vaqueros, the ranchos. They own the land that the spring currently occupies, and all the land that is now Santa Monica, except for the little boca, the little canyon there. That was the Reyes and the Marquez family. He was granted 38,000 acres by the revolutionary Mexican government. And that all was great until 1847, when the Americans invaded Mexico, took all the land, and signed a treaty. They were paid, I think, $40 million to the government of Mexico for all the land, that is now called Arizona, New Mexico, California, Nevada, Utah, New Mexico. And thus it fell into the hands of the Americans, who went about subdividing and portioning off the land for sale to settlers. This is a really wonderful topographic map which shows the drainage. And you can see the LA River going down to the South Bay, I guess they call it, near Palos Verdes. That river has changed course many times. It used to drain into Bayona until I think 1834 there was a flood and it changed course. So all the alluvium that we're sitting on was deposited by this LA River that drained the whole San Gabriel Range, the San Fernando Valley, but no longer passes through our neighborhood. This is Santa Monica in 1875. The land was bought by the Colonel Baker and Senator Jones, who founded the city. They divided it up. They created a company called the Santa Monica Land and Water Company. But this is the first iteration, of the great city of Santa Monica, with this, the pier and the steamers bringing products from around the world. Now, this map we found, Nina Fresco actually found this. It shows in the upper right, very top, it shows a reservoir that was taken from the two springs that form the Kuruvungna Village and piped down around the topography. You can see a pipe, it says water pipe, and it goes right down to where 25th and Wilshire, that park, what's it called? Douglas Park. There's still a pond there. This was the original water supply for the city of Santa Monica. In fact, that's where they got their name. Why is there water coming out of the ground right there at that site at Kuruvungna? Because of this fault that separates or that breaks the aquifer, causing the water that's draining underground from the Santa Monica Mountains. When it hits a fault, it surfaces. And there used to be many more springs along the base of the Santa Monica Range. And these are where the permanent villages of the natives would be located. So if you drive down Barrington, you might go slow as you come downhill and see this sign that alerts you to this, really special, unique cultural heritage site. It's a state national monument now, but you see the fencing, the bars. It looks like a federal prison, but it's actually a high school called University High School, which is owned by the LAUSD. They purchased the land in 1900, 26 acres, and built the high school. This is the sign you'll see as you come into the parking lot. And this is what the grounds look like May 2018, which is when I got involved. 30 years ago, a group of alumni, descendants, community members found that the springs had been abandoned by the school. And they got involved, they cleaned it up, they created a foundation, and they ran it for many, many years. But it's tough managing a nonprofit. Let's just put it that way. And it fell into disrepair once again. We got involved, meaning my son was looking for an Eagle Scout project. We thought this is a good one. We brought Troop 2 Can Do, and we did a big cleanup, and then I got involved because of my ancestry. I felt sort of the duty and an obligation to the springs to see what we could do to restore it and bring it back and share it with the whole community. So you can see these are all invasive weeds. If you don't maintain the site, it will become engulfed quite quickly because the land is so fertile, there's moisture. So it just became completely, overtaken by invasive. So we embarked on this multi-year project of restoring the springs. This is where the spring water it terminates on the grounds of Uni High. It goes into a drain and out to, I think, Pico Kenter is where it ends up in the ocean. You can see the building behind, that's the YMCA that they built about 8, maybe 9 years ago. And we were trying to figure out how we can maintain the hydrology and clean this place up and use this water in a respectful way instead of letting it all go down the drain. So we created a bypass pipe to go around the pond so we could clean them. And this pipe is connected right to the lower springs, we call it. I got a 5-gallon bucket, a stopwatch, and some witnesses. It took 7.5 seconds to fill up a 5-gallon bucket. Now, we ran the numbers. Comes out to about 56,000 gallons a day from this one lower spring. And these are volunteers, Boy Scouts. As we remove the invasives, we're putting in all native plants. You can see the Anamopsis, Yerba Mansa, mugwort going in along the edge of the pond. This is the pond after the big cleanup. As we refilled it, there was probably 90 years of sludge and sediment that we had to dig out. We had to drain it out. It took a month for the sludge to be dry enough to get it out with excavators and bobcats. It's a concrete-lined pond built in the 1930s by the school. But if you don't maintain a pond, it will become ultimately a pasture. It'll fill up with sediments until the water changes course. So because these are ornamental, we did a major cleanup, restoration. We took all the sludge and the silt, we mixed it into the earth, we cut all the weeds, composted everything, created incredibly rich soil that we irrigate with spring water. This is the magic and the beauty and the power of water. It's the most essential element. It's the most precious substance in the cosmos, if you're an animal, like us, right? So we use this. This is the spring on the left. You can see that the eye where the water emerges from the earth. We can close off the pipe that leads to the pools and flood out the areas that we would like to irrigate. At the bottom where it drains, we can also divert the water to create a riparian zone. And this is what we did to establish the natives along this fence. You can't see it. It doesn't look like this anymore. It's grown nicely, and it's very green and lush. So we found a company that does solar-powered irrigation systems, solar pumps, up in Wood Lake, California. We ordered a kit, and the pump is on the right. We installed it into a 6-inch standpipe that's connected to the spring water. That little solar panel on the left will allow us to pump 320 gallons an hour wherever we like throughout the site. We use that pump and the spring water. You see the white pipe on the right, that is spring water that's getting pumped from the spring using the sun. And we did this kind of as a fun way to level out the land for planting. It's kind of like a moat surrounding the key, but it allowed us to grade the land in such a way that we can flood irrigate for our plants. We don't have high pressure, we don't need drip, we don't need sprinklers. We've got plenty of water, just let it flow. So this is an example of playing with water. Because we can use the spring water for irrigation now, we've created a Mesoamerican garden with corn, beans, squash, and other plants from the Americas, tomatoes, chilies, avocados, chayote. This is, you can see we kind of played with the idea of the rice paddy flood irrigation. So we flood out these basins and then plant. That corn got 16 feet tall. The squirrels loved the corn. We've been able to restore the habitat to such a degree that we're able to reintroduce native species that haven't been around for a while. So this is what they call a chorus frog, native to California. You hear them croaking in the canyon sometimes at the right time of year. This is a Cooper's hawk. He lives there and eats the crayfish that we throw to him. And these are, we get mallards that visit. We have ducklings right now today. You'll see little ducklings scampering about, trying to avoid the coyote. what happened here? So we got a line on where to get arroyo chub. These are protected, they're endangered, they're threatened. These are the native minnows, the native fish of the LA basin. And they used to exist through all the streams that are now covered with concrete. They've lost their habitat. So we introduced these to the springs, and they're thriving. We actually have a sizable population. There they are. They grow now. Unfortunately, we also have the great blue heron that comes in and hits on them. What are you going to do? It's tooth and claw out there in the world. But they get to be about 4 inches in length, and they're really beautiful fish. And they lay eggs. And the problem is somebody introduced crayfish, red swamp crayfish from Louisiana. And we have had an extermination eradication program. You cannot exterminate them. You can keep a lid on them with traps, but they will eat the eggs of our native creatures. So we catch them and sell them back to Allen's Aquarium. You get $1 for a big one, 50 cents for a small one. And, it helps with the foundation, right? There's a California toad in the water. Now, these are the upper springs. There were 2 springs that were noted by the Spanish when they came, and they reminded them of the tears of St. Monica, who was a 4th century Roman citizen and a Christian and a saint from North Africa. She had a son named Augustine who was always getting in trouble, and he wanted to know what it was like to be a sinner. So she was famous for her tears. And so the Spanish called this Las Lágrimas de Santa Mónica. And in 1875, when they built the city, they took the water from these springs and they took the name. They used the name of these springs for the city. So this is why these are historic. Not just for the city, but the bay, the mountain range, the freeway, the liquor store on Wilshire, all named from these springs. This upper spring, however, used to flow freely on the campus of Uni High. And in 2015, they capped it because they found some, what is the chemical, the tetrachloroethylene or TCE? They found a small amount, maybe 20 parts per billion. But they were alarmed and they shut it down. They thought the kids were going to get sick and die. We've done a lot of testing on the water. We've convinced them that this water is not going to harm anybody. If you drink it, if this is all you had to drink, then you may want to filter it. But the water is incredibly pure, apart from that little plume. We have our water tested, the lower spring, and it is exceptionally pure. It is not polluted. It's not contaminated. We're not drinking it directly from here. So we've convinced the school, Uni High, it's their 100th anniversary this year, and we are going to liberate the springs. We have a commitment from Nick Melvoin, the board, the member of the LAUSD board, he's said $100,000 they set aside for the restoration of these upper springs. We have to go through CEQA and all these things because we're going to be digging and you may find artifacts. But all we have to do is take out that green pipe, and that pipe that emerges from that cliff 43,000 gallons a day. So between these 2 springs, we have 100,000 gallons, I believe, a day. I think Sunny told me that they process 1 million gallons. Is that correct? 10 million gallons. Okay, I was wrong. So, yeah, well, there's a lot more mouths to drink, I guess, in Santa Monica. So this is our goal this year, to rescue the upper springs, to celebrate the survival of this ancient village, the resilience of the people that still care about the land and that have an intimate connection. And we're very happy to have the support of everybody here, the whole city, whoever's watching. It's easy to donate to our foundation. There's the upper spring once again. This is going to be transformed, just as you've seen Kuruvungna itself transform. Come back in a couple years. It'll all be native plants along the edge, irrigated with spring water. We're going to teach LAUSD how to keep those fields green. It can be done. Little solar panel, a pump, distribution. Sunny's going to help us. We're going to re-green the city using spring water. That's our goal. There's surplus land at the edge of our of our 2-acre parcel that we lease from the LAUSD. It's surplus land. It's been abandoned. It has these 2 old bungalows on it. We're asking them to remove the bungalows, the asphalt, so we can expand the gardens of Kuruvungna to benefit the whole community of plants and animals, and us humans as well. You can see what happens when you start planting natives and they take off. It creates an incredible ecosystem, and it's attractive to all these birds, butterflies, creatures that are coming around. It's a sanctuary for the natives. And I don't see why we can't, do the same thing on a school campus. So it's not our city, I know, but we have an allegiance to the springs because this was our water supply. So we will be involved in the restoration. And this is the key that was built out of grasses, reeds, tule, which is the giant grass that we collected from the Bayona freshwater marsh. And we're trying to grow this in our springs as well, but not the quantity that we need to build something like this. So this I think is a great achievement. And this is our mission: to protect, preserve, restore, and revitalize Kuruvungna and educate the public about the Gabrielino Tongva people. And there's some information if you'd like to get deeper into it. We have a web page with more information. We have an email address that you can go and donate. We have PayPal. We have Venmo. Thank you very much, everybody. And I don't know if we have questions after, but I think Sunny is going to be up next, right? Is that very good? Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'll say it's always tough to follow Bob. I'm not as motivating. My stuff is not natural, I guess. It's with technology. But thank you for being here tonight. Hopefully I can share a little bit about what we do here at the city to help preserve the environment as well. So at the beginning, I want to think about sustainability in water and some of the challenges that we face today, right? We all know water scarcity is an issue. You constantly hear about droughts or mega droughts. And though this is a mega drought, it's actually getting worse and worse. So the terminology of mega droughts is kind of played out. The general public is tired of hearing of it, right? But the sad reality is it's getting worse. What is climate change impacting to our water supply and the earth overall? We also have growing cities we need to deal with. Like in Santa Monica, we have to zone and build additional 9,000 housing units, right? We're a built-out city, so how do we accommodate that? And how do we have the proper water, wastewater services to accommodate that? We also deal with aging infrastructure. A lot of our infrastructure was built early on, as kind of Bob mentioned, I'll get in my slide, our municipal water system was established in the 1920s. So some of our distribution or assets is approaching 100 years old, if not 100 already. All right. Before I begin, a couple of things that really reminded me and also motivated me when I was visiting the Kuruvungna Springs and speaking with Bob. These are the 2 impacts that it had on me personally. So this is not the city's view, this is my personal view. You know, the larger connection that is between water, sustainable land management practices, and the environment, how important they're linked together. The other thing in the role that I play today here for the city and managing the city water supply is the role that we must play in the government to protect the environment as well as preserving this resource, right? What could we do to advance that and continue those practices that Bob talked about? So I want to start with providing a little history. It kind of picked up where maybe Bob has left off, right, in his recap of the history of Santa Monica. In terms of water, in 1875, like Bob's slide had, the Santa Monica Land and Water Company was founded. This area was served by, I believe, 3 or 4 private water companies. There was the City Water Company and also the Santa Monica Water Company that was established later on. In 1916, the city of Santa Monica decided to purchase the 4 private water companies and form the municipal water system that we have today. There's a key fact of that too that I'll share at the end of this slide. But to meet with growing water demands in the area, we also are a founding member of the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California in 1928 that funded the construction of the Colorado River Aqueduct that brought water from that river to this area in 1941. The reason why 1916 was very important, it's the very reason why the city of Santa Monica was not annexed into the city of LA today. That's why we are our own city, because we had our own water supply. The reason why city of LA is so big is because they had the LA Aqueduct that brought water, and that city needed water to meet their growing needs. They had to be annexed into LA to access that. So the reason why we're able to maintain our city is because of water supply, and I think people forget how important that is, not just as a precious resource for us to live, but it also factors in a lot of things and decisions we make today. Here's just an engineering drawing. I am an engineer, so I have boring drawings here, not as much photos as the last presentation, but this is the engineering drawing of the Arcadia Water Treatment Plant. And you see that circle in that middle figure, that's our reservoir. That's gonna be turning 100 years old this year. So that reservoir has been there since 1924. And on the right is just an image of that facility back in the 20s. I also mentioned the Colorado River Aqueduct. I was very fortunate to visit these facilities earlier this year and looking at the intake structure, how that water is conveyed over to Santa Monica. I mean, it's amazing the things that they built in the 30s, right, to bring that water source. These are just a couple photos of the facilities on the way. You have the Copper Basin, one of the pumping facilities that's pumping that river water over to us. And then the bottom right is the open channel canals. So if you're driving along the 10 freeway, heading out to Coachella or State Border, pay attention. You'll see this pretty close to the 10 freeway as you're going out to the desert. We also expanded our Arcadia Water Treatment Plant. This was in the 50s and 60s where we needed to pump additional groundwater, right? To do that, we had to soften the water. Natural groundwater is very hard, right, for us to do that. So we upgraded the facility to soften the water to serve the community in the 50s and 60s. You know, but if you look at the history, what we've been relying on is sort of the natural water cycle. I'll get into how we are leveraging technology to mimic that. But the reason why this has been impacted, if you remember this as a kid, the natural water cycle, you need rain, right? Rain falls in the rivers, streams, lakes. We use that as drinking water, or it percolates into the ground where we extract the groundwater. We use that groundwater, or we treat it and dispose it to the ocean. Once it gets to the ocean, it gets evaporated, goes to the clouds, and it rains somewhere to start that process again. But the challenge is that with the climate change, you know, we still have that, but unfortunately the clouds go somewhere else. It rains in different parts of the region, where it's very dry here. So how do we leverage technology to help with this water cycle? Those are the next couple of slides I'll talk about. So kind of fast forwarding today, one of the key city initiatives we have is to be water self-sufficient. How can we leverage and maximize local water supply so we're not dependent on imported water sources? So this initiative was actually directed by our city council back in 2011, right? We had our first iteration of the Sustainable Water Master Plan completed in 2014. We updated in 2018, and that's the plan that we're almost to the finish line. We're gonna be there this summer. We're a few months behind schedule, but we're gonna get there this summer. So key benefits of that plan is to have long-term cost benefits with ratepayers, right? Money talks. We wanna also provide a diverse and sustainable, climate-resilient water supply for our community, and also to reduce our energy footprint. As you can imagine, that water that comes from the Colorado River or from the State Water Project from Northern California, that gets pumped over 7 peaks to get to us. It takes a lot of energy to get that water over to us. Just a few stats about City of Santa Monica and our Water Resources Division. We serve 93,000+ residents in the city. What's interesting here is, as you guys know, we're a popular tourist destination. During peak summer, we could serve a population over 500,000, right? Even though our residential population is small, we serve a really big community here with our water and wastewater services. On average, we produce about 9 to 10 million gallons of drinking water. We collect and dispose of 14 million gallons of wastewater. That number is higher because of Palisades and Malibu, part of their wastewater flows through our system. We were at 77,000 gallons of recycled water, but with the completion of our sustainable water infrastructure project a couple years ago, we're now able to produce up to 1.5 million gallons per day of recycled water. And we also have 4 large water storage reservoirs in our system. The key initiative, as I mentioned, is to move to water self-sufficiency, where we could source 99% of our water locally. So looking back on 2011, when we completed the Charnock Wellfield Restoration Project to restore a groundwater supply that was contaminated with MTBE, we were about 50-50. Then you fast forward to 2017, this is in response to a severe drought that occurred for 3-4 years. We implemented a lot of conservation measures to reduce our water demand. And the reason why I crossed out 2023 saying we're still working on it is we're a little behind schedule due to COVID. It also had impact on some of our projects. So original 99% goal, we're probably gonna hit about 85-90%, which I think is still very good, right? We have a plan now that's in the works to figure out how do we get that. Now, last a couple percentage to get it 99%. It's not a linear scale. To get that last couple drops is quite challenging. This schematic is our sort of water supply before we implemented the Sustainable Water Master Plan. Right? We have our local groundwater from Sharnock, Olympic well fields, whatever else we need, we import from Metropolitan Water District. We treat that at our central water treatment plant, at our Arcadia water treatment plant. Our residents use that water. They generate wastewater. They all go to City of LA's Hyperion wastewater treatment plant. We have a small little Santa Monica urban runoff facility before we completed the SWIP that produced that 77,000 gallons of per day of recycled water. The three key components of our Sustainable Water Master Plan, the first one was conservation. This component was impacted by COVID. We had to reduce budget there. We also lost 2 staff. We lost 50% of the staff in that team. So we were only able to maintain status quo on our conservation program. We're hoping to revamp that and restore that in the next couple of years to advance conservation efforts. You see this slide's getting a little busier now. The second component is how do we leverage alternative water supplies? You know, your non-traditional sources, stormwater, urban runoff, municipal wastewater. How do we leverage those resources and turn that into and supplementing a local water supply? So we're leveraging all those resources to produce water that's suitable for irrigation, toilet flushing, cooling towers, et cetera, for non-potable. But that water is purified actually beyond drinking water quality, where we're then putting it back into our local groundwaters to recharge that. The last component is to restore some of our contaminated groundwater basins. The Olympic well field has historically impacted by contamination from industrial activities, was from Gillette, Papermate, and Boeing that had the TCE, PCE, 1,4-dioxane from industrial solvents. To restore that to full capability and clean up the contamination, we're building a new advanced treatment facility there as well to remove those contaminants. So at the end, you see this water cycle more complete, where we're leveraging, we're putting things back. So remember that Mother Nature cycle? We're trying to mimic that with different technology and different water sources as well to keep that water here. So some of our key projects and innovations, I'll just highlight primarily the Sustainable Water Infrastructure Project. This is the project that Debra mentioned that we got second place in the world at the Global Water Awards, which we're very proud of. We finished behind the country of UAE. So imagine that a small city like Santa Monica finished second place to a country, right? I thought that was pretty cool. And me and my staff that was there, we didn't realize our name was called. When the award was announced, we're like, oh, we won. Somebody actually else pointed out to us that then we went up to stage to accept the award. We did not think we were in the running for that. So for this project, there's 3 key elements. The harvest stormwater. So the first element is at our Santa Monica Pier. We have a 1.5 million gallon stormwater harvesting tank and upgrading our existing Smurf facility. The second element is a brand new 1 MGD advanced water treatment facility that purifies wastewater stormwater to beyond drinking water standards. So it treats a blend of 30% stormwater to 70% wastewater. What's interesting here is a lot of people ask us, why are you mixing stormwater and wastewater? You're dirtying up the stormwater. It's actually the other way around. Stormwater, once it hits the street, is harder to treat than wastewater. Wastewater, where does it come from? It comes from us, right? As I say, it's organically sourced. It comes from human bodies. But stormwater, when it hits the street, it picks up a lot of inorganic, human-made products, heavy metals, oil and grease, whatever you want to throw on the street, it ends up in your water supply. So we really need to be aware of what we're doing, what we're throwing into the environment, because that comes back to haunt us, right? The last element is another 1.5 million gallon stormwater harvesting tank to capture more stormwater that's just flowing into the ocean right now. So the driver of this project actually started with how do we improve the beach water quality in the Santa Monica Bay and get in compliance with our EWIMP and MS4 permits. Then it snowballed into, well, how do we leverage that once we capture all that? Because there's no regulations right now that allows us to do that. So we actually had to negotiate with the regulators on how to treat stormwater. So I'm sure you hear in the news, like we should do more, capture more stormwater. The challenge we have as a municipality is there is no regulation. So I could capture all I want, but there's nothing I could do with it, right? You could do it as a private property owner because you're not governed by the same regulations we are as a municipality. So that is the big challenge. The only thing you could do with stormwater is let it sit and percolate back into the ground. But I can't treat it and serve it directly as drinking water right now. So the only way for us to work that in is create that wastewater to supplement. Not only is that a consistent source, but we could get that permitted, and the stormwater was written in as a contributing source water to that project. So in the end, we were able to create an additional 1,600 acre feet of water for the city here. That's about 10% of our city's water supply. Just a couple photos of the facility. As I joked, this is our best kept secret because you will never find it. It's underneath a parking lot. Right, a lot of people show up looking around for a tour. They're like, I'm like, you're at the right place. It's the parking lot. You know, the only two access points is two little white buildings that you see in that photo in that parking lot. And everything else is beneath it. The subsurface level 1 is where all the treatment equipment is at. And then the sub-level 2 is our process basin, our biological process basins, the free chlorinated contact tanks. If you're interested in a tour, feel free to reach out, contact us. We'd be more than happy to show you what we shoved underneath the parking lot here. These are just a couple photos of the construction. On the left, actually both of these are the stormwater harvesting tank. So the excavation is about 50, 60 feet deep. If you're not familiar about how deep that is, you can see that building on the other side. That's a 5-story building, so that's about how deep our excavation was, is how tall that building was. So the treatment process we use here, state-of-the-art. It's probably the best there is right now available for it. We have membrane bioreactor, cartridge filtration, reverse osmosis, UV chlorine, advanced oxidation, free chlorine. This together, the treatment train works together to remove what in the regulation referred to as 12-10-10. So 12 log removal is 99.10% removal of viruses and other pathogens. So essentially there's nothing left in this water. It's the first stormwater direct injection project in the state, the first membrane bioreactor and cartridge filtration used in the state for this application. It's also the first completely below ground treatment facility here as well. So just a few more slides. So as I mentioned, the natural water cycle, right? When that water is being purified is when it's evaporating, like distillation. So all those treatment technologies that we have at our sustainable water infrastructure project is to produce that water, similar as evaporation, to purify that. So you can see it takes that many steps to get it to the same quality as that water being evaporated from the ocean to the clouds. Right? So that's how we're leveraging one of our technology in our projects to try to accelerate Mother Nature and keep that water here and purify it. Last couple projects I talked about, one of our roles is to also protect the environment, sustainable management, which is very important. As I mentioned, the Olympic well field that was impacted by contamination. The giant red heart you see at the bottom right, that's a contamination plume that we've modeled that's underneath the ground there. That's what we're striving to clean up, and that's actually gonna take about 50 to 80 years. We're starting with that this summer. You see the multiple straws kind of sinking in. The yellow, green ones are our monitoring wells to track and be able to know where everything is at. And the purple straw is our groundwater extraction wells of pumping that out and treating that. So we're removing all the contaminants there to produce drinking water from there as well. So this is one of the new additions at our Arcadia Water Treatment Plant, is the new 3MGD system to remove all the contamination there. We're also increasing the recovery of our RO system, right? That's very important for sustainable management of our groundwater. So right now, or before, our reverse osmosis system to soften the water, for every 10 gallons of groundwater pumped, we produce 8 gallons of drinking water. With this technology, this is gonna be the first, potentially first RO at this scale in the world. We're gonna be able to increase that to 90%. So for the same 10 gallons, we're gonna produce 9 gallons of drinking water, right? So we're not overtaxing our groundwater supply as well. Lastly, just some acknowledgements. As I mentioned, it takes a village. We received several funding partners for these programs. We can't do it all on our own. It's very expensive. We invested over $300 million to date on these projects. We received a lot of outside funding from low interest loans to grants, even issue a water revenue bond to help fund these projects. And these are all various project partners from state agencies, contractors, consultants, other water agencies helping us both funding and also implementing these projects. This is the key slide I show all of our ratepayers. A lot of them ask us, why are we spending so much money to do this? Why don't we just keep buying met water? It's cheaper. That is true, if that's what we did today. Met water is cheaper than all this, but what is it gonna look like in the future, right? So the green line is our total water cost, production cost of all these different water sources that we projected in 2018. And that orange dashed line is our imported water cost. So yeah, it is cheaper in 2023 to keep buying imported water. But with all the outside funding, you see that blue line. But thanks to all that outside funding, we're able to compete with the imported water from day one, and you see how the two diverges 5-10 years from now, right? That's why you want to continue to invest in our local water supply. It's part of our history. It's made us who we are as a city, right? But it also makes economical sense to do that. So with that, that's the end of my slides. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll share. Okay. Thank you. Thanks. So you can see why this conversation is so exciting. And I think as we were preparing for this and had a conversation, it was just really interesting, Sunny, to hear you say like what you had sort of learned by being at the Springs and this idea of like really thinking about interconnection. And I guess that's something that I'd love to touch on a little bit. Like you started to mention that wastewater is cleaner than stormwater, right? And you mentioned like a couple of the things that makes it so, but can you just talk a little bit more about that, and also just about like the kind of natural versus infrastructural filtration that happens both at SWIP and at the Springs?
So I think for the comment that I made about wastewater when we purify that, as I remind people, wastewater, like as I mentioned, is from your human body, right? It's from what you eat that comes out. But a lot of the other sources, stormwater, we have to think about what we do, how we impact the environment. I mentioned heavy metals, oil and grease. There's all the talk right now is about forever chemicals. You guys hear a lot about PFAS, forever chemicals, in the newspaper. But where does that come from? Those are manufactured by us because we thought it was a great invention, waterproof clothing, waterproof shoes, nonstick pans, Scotch Guard, all of that has PFAS. We demanded that as a consumer because they thought it would be a great product. We kept buying it, and they keep making it, right? So part of that is we have to be conscious of what we use and how that impacts the environment when it's not natural. Another example would be microplastics. That's probably the next big challenge we're going to have to tackle in the water industry. An example I give people too is our face wash. Remember, your face wash is those beads. You scrub your face, it feels like it's clean, but do you really need the beads? Because that's a challenge for us to remove and not have that discharge into the environment. So those are things I think we need to start thinking about what we do day in, day out, how that impacts the environment. When I have residents that's concerned about maybe drinking their wastewater one day, purified, going into the ground, I ask them, like, well, what do you throw down the toilet you're so concerned with? Maybe you shouldn't be throwing that down the toilet anymore. Right? And if you're really concerned, if you've been to Disneyland, you've drank that water because all of Orange County's water has been recharged this way for decades. So if you've been to Disneyland, Orange County, you have drank this water. Is perfectly safe. It's better quality, I would say, than a lot of our traditional water sources. So I'll let Bob comment about the natural way. I mean, we still leverage that as much as we can. It's just land intensive. It's hard to do that in a built-on environment.
Yeah.
Would you like to share, maybe, I guess I would touch on two things. One is you mentioned that there was some contamination found at the Springs. I'd love for you to just share how that gets there. Like, if I'm assuming that that's coming through the aquifer and contaminating it. So I think just like a little bit of general knowledge around that.
Yeah. Well, there was a dry cleaner up on Wilshire. They use a cleaning solution called chlorotetraethylene, I believe. And this stuff is gnarly. It can sink through the concrete. And it got in the groundwater up above where we are. And there are 3 seeps that are actually, I talk about 2 of them, but there's another one that's further, the furthest away has the most contamination. It's not like a Superfund site, but the middle pond, seep 2, has a smaller, less degree of contamination. So we know there's a plume up in that area. I think they're working on it. I guess they're cleaning it up. I don't think they dry clean there anymore. But our spring, seep 3, we measured it. It has 3 parts per billion. 3 parts per billion of this chemical. The federal standard, I believe, is 11 parts per billion. You're allowed to have 11 parts per billion. It's an infinitesimal amount. They have such sensitive instruments now to see this. When it gets exposed to light, I believe it evaporates. It dissolves in the atmosphere, I believe. But we pass it through a carbon filter if we want to drink it. just to be extra cautious. But the water coming right from the springs, we had it tested with hydrologists. We've done studies, and we found with isotopic studies that the water is between 40 and 70 years old. From the time the raindrop hits the mountain range, it takes between 40 and 70. It's kind of blended as it comes down underground and it emerges from the surface. I think that's probably the most efficient way to clean the water. Give it 50 years, slowly migrating underground, and it'll be almost pure. Our water is exceptionally pure, I believe. I asked the hydrologist, test the water coming out of the drinking fountain that the kids are drinking. And they took a sample, and we looked at it later when the results came in. That water has a lot more crap in it. I shouldn't say crap, sorry. It's very clean because they've killed everything. It's LA water. It's got bromoform and chloroform and all these other things that are going on there to clean it and kill all the bugs. And I asked the hydrologist, what water would you prefer to drink? And they, the spring water. We have a Japanese community in Sawtell. They come and collect the water for their tea ceremony because it's never been treated. It's still alive. When the water comes up to the ground, it's so alive. As soon as the sun hits it, boom, it takes off. There's algae, there's life. It's really incredible to see living water. In order to live in a big city like this, however, we don't always get to enjoy that sort of source. We do have to treat it. And I would like to know a bottle of water that you buy at Erewhon in a plastic jug, what that costs. If you take the city of Santa Monica water, which what I hear, and I believe, I trust you guys, it's incredibly clean and pure and it's soft even, right? What's the difference in the savings?
So for our tap water, our tier 1 price is 1 cent a gallon. There's no cheaper commodity out there at 1 cent a gallon. Imagine how much you pay for gas and other things, right? For bottled water, it could be anywhere from $1 to $10 a gallon. Right? What are you paying for? You're paying for the packaging, the marketing. A lot of those companies source tap water. They say they filter it again, but as I explained, right, 99.9% removal. What is their filter going to remove that we haven't already, right? They're just marketing to give the consumer the extra assurance, like, oh, because it's bottled, it's higher tech than coming out of the faucet. But they actually just bottle tap water and sell it for most parts. As I often use a couple examples, if you look at Arrowhead, groundwater in Redlands, Crystal Geyser, if you ever drive to Mammoth, halfway along the way in the desert or middle of nowhere, you see a Crystal Geyser bottling plant. It's not really mountain spring water, right? It's groundwater that they're pumping just as ours, except they spend that marketing. So that's what you're paying for, right, in the bottle. And the difference, too, I educate people is like bottled water and what we do are regulated differently. Bottled water is regulated by the FDA. They're checked on maybe once a year. We're required to monitor 24/7 around the clock. For our water quality. So if there's anything out of the ordinary, we immediately stop or divert, and we don't serve that water. It doesn't keep going. So there's definitely big differences between tap and bottled water.
So I have 2 questions. So it's not necessary to have a fancy water filter if you live in Santa Monica. You can drink it right from the tap.
Well, like as I tell customers too, yeah.
If your building plumbing is.
Yeah, so that's exactly it, Bob. As I tell people, is we can't be responsible for household plumbing. Our responsibility stops at the meter, whatever happens after that. And some of the challenges are, like during the 70s, a lot of lead pipe was used because they thought that was a very good material, and there's a lot of contamination due to lead service lines. So we're trying to remove as much as we can or help our customers identify it on their end so they could take it out as well. So if you want a little extra protection because you don't know what's in that plumbing, something like a household filter would help. I'm trying not to name brands or I'll get in trouble. Right, and the other thing I say is too is taste. A lot of people come up to me, they're like, oh, but this bottled water tastes so much better. So I tell them like, well, what we're more concerned with is safety, not how it tastes, because that could change from person to person, right? So the example I also give is like Brussels sprouts. Remember, kids hate Brussels. You boil them, nobody wants to eat them. Maybe there was actually one in my tour group that said they'll eat boiled Brussels sprouts. But if you char it, put some vinaigrette on it, you go to the restaurant, they'll sell it to you for $15 a plate, right? So it's the same thing. It tastes better, but you got to pay more, right? We're only worried about the safety of water because they also use it for shower, irrigation, laundry and stuff like that. So safety is priority. Taste, that's up to the individual. And I say too, if you pay us $1 or $10 a gallon, I can make it taste whatever you want.
Put it in a fancy bottle.
Yeah.
Take it to Erewhon. I have another question. I noticed on your graph, you have 10 million or 40 million gallons of storage.
Yes,
That's about 4 days.
that's correct.
So we have a 4-day water supply in the city.
Or one day when all the tourists come.
Oh,
So
We have to
we do draw all the reservoir down in a peak day, and we fill it back up at night. So yes, it's 4 days on average, but to meet our peak demand, it gets emptied out.
so we're right on the edge sometimes.
Yes.
If the infrastructure collapsed and there was no power to pump through the water, what would life be like?
You know, sometimes I joke that maybe that's what it would take for people to realize, because I think we talk about the drought, the climate, but at the end of the day, has it really impacted anybody? Have you turned on the faucet and water hasn't come out? I actually have one of my staff here in the audience. She'll tell you one day, one of our most challenging days when we had that 5 water main break. Right, my staff, my team was pushed to the limits. I only have 3-4 crews, but we have 5 breaks. I remember the city manager calling me and say, "Hey, Sunny, are you aware of this?" Like, yeah, we'll get to it, but we got these other ones we got to tackle first, right? We pride ourselves. I think we fix all our leaks within 12 hours usually, right? I don't think I've ever seen anything longer. So people haven't been without water for more than 12 hours at most. So.
Now, I'm sorry. So, Sonny, tell them about the robust construction of our.
So that
water system.
underground bunker is actually the safest facility in the city. It's earthquake-proof, unlimited water supply, as long as you keep flushing your toilet. Yeah, but we are aware that there's, I think, at least now 3 fault lines to our city. So in those areas, when we do pipe replacements, we are looking at earthquake compatible piping, because you could imagine, the pipe connects together, earthquake happened, the earth shifts is going to break it, right? So some of these pipes that they develop now, there's like I think 3 or 4 manufacturers actually makes them. Before it was only one out of Japan. They can actually deflect at certain angles and not break, right? So over those fault lines, we're trying to replace those with those earthquake resistant pipelines. There's not that much of those left. We replaced most of those already, but the amazing thing is I actually think things that manufactured in the 20s and 30s are better than now. If you look at the Colorado River aqueducts, some of those pumps are original 1930s, right? They have to actually manufacture their own part, mold it to replace parts on those pumps. They don't make them anymore, and they last forever. So it makes you wonder about the things we're making today is not as reliable as it was, decades ago. So sometimes the old stuff actually, like our reservoir, that's been through a lot of earthquakes, and it's still in one piece. And the way it was constructed when we went in there, and I was just like, oh my God, I can't believe this is how they constructed it, it's still together, right? They have wood frame roofs, right? You don't see that these days anymore for that big of a roof that's all on a wood frame. I went in there, I thought I was looking at IKEA, right, with how much wood was in there.
So I have a question. The reservoir you're referring to is at the treatment plant.
Yes.
What about the top of Franklin Hill? There's a reservoir.
Yeah, we have a 5 million gallon reservoir there as well.
So there's 5 million up there, and then there's 5 million at the treatment plant.
And then we have another 5 in San Vicente beneath the road there, and then 25 million gallons at the Riviera Country Club.
So how do you get the water pressure? Is it gravity from Franklin, or is it pumped?
Yeah, so all our water is pumped to those 4 reservoirs, and then from there is gravity fed to all of our residents. We actually have pressure control valves between 2 different zones, so the water doesn't blow out of your faucet. So there's more than enough pressure to gravity feed all of our customers. So the biggest risk is if there's a pipe that breaks, right? And all of our we have multiple ways to get it to different zones. So you're not just served by one pipeline to that zone. We have 2 different ways to get it in there. So there's some redundancy in there, except for the individual homeowners, there's only one service line, right, to the homeowner. But in terms of an area that's served by a distribution system, we have backups to those areas as well.
So you mentioned tourists drawing it down. Is that because of the hotels, showers?
I mean, it's just people that come and visit, eat, stay in the city. That's part of the economy, I guess, too, right? In terms of that balance. If you look at how important, if you look at what we support as a region, we support a tourism economy that's about $3 billion right? It's a lot of job even for disadvantaged communities from, a lot of those workers come and work those jobs as well as generate revenue. Overall, that is probably our biggest industry here in the city.
But you actually notice the
Yeah, I look
tourists
at those,
coming, reservoirs dropping.
I look at those graphs and we try to figure out like how to manage our supplies because we try to take advantage of low energy periods to fill our reservoirs as well, right? To try to save a few bucks as well. So we look at those data very closely and manage it that way.
Well, yeah, as a builder in Santa Monica, we've been required for many years to harvest the rainfall. 3/4 of an inch of rain on your hardscape. You calculate that, you come up with cubic foot. You have to create a ponding area or some sort of a holding subterranean to capture that water. And the idea is to keep it from rushing into the bay. That was the impetus, I think, save the bay because of all the flushing of all the horrors that are in the curb and gutters. But if you keep it on the site, it does migrate down into the aquifer, but not as deep as he would like,
No.
because they go down. How deep are your wells?
A couple hundred feet. Our wells go down about 300 feet, 300 to 400. I think is our deepest well go down to like 500 feet, I believe.
And how old is that water?
We have not tested. I probably have to ask USGS. I think they done some studies on it. I don't know that off the top of my head. But in terms of that water, that the permeable pavement, it doesn't make it into the groundwater table. That gets lost in the vadose zone. There's a
What zone?
vadose zone. So it's between the surface and where our water table is. There's that whole level of soil that has no water in there. Otherwise, if there's water in there, your house will start sinking, right? So all that's pretty compacted. Your water has to make it through there. That's probably about 100 feet, at least. That water that's collected on the streets, permeable pavement, has to make it through to get to the groundwater table. And on top of that, what we found in contaminants in urban runoff, I'm actually more scared that if it does.
So how does it get recharged then?
Naturally. So like what Bob says is actually most of it is recharged naturally at the Santa Monica Mountains, and it goes into the ground, percolates, and it moves. So it actually takes decades for that water to get to us. So a lot of people think too, oh, it's raining. We're out of a drought. I won't see that water for a couple decades. Right, kind of like what Bob was saying, how old that water is. It takes a long time for it to travel underground.
Yeah, there's some parts of the basin where there's fossil water. It could be thousands of years old.
So you're saying there's like fault lines or something that it goes through
There's
in the mountain?
layers of.
Yeah, there's more permeable soil at those areas because it's not developed. Right, so what happens when you build all these buildings, you compact the soil so you can put a building on top of it that won't sink. So that takes away natural recharge space. But at the mountain front is still a lot of open land. The soil there is more permeable for natural water, rainwater to recharge our basin. And then all of our water moves from northeast to southwest. Right, so if you think about where Hollywood, it goes from Hollywood direction to like Marina Del Rey. That's the direction of the natural water flow.
It goes into the storm drain, and it goes down Stoner Boulevard Avenue, I think, and it dumps out. It does not make it across the Bayona Valley. Does not get to Bayona. It goes, I believe, into the Pico Kenter outfall, and from there it flows into the ocean. I suppose it benefits the fish. It's not for you, but for me, it's a lot of water.
No, that's a considerable amount of water. I'll take some if you got some.
I was approached recently by a gentleman who has a water company up in Idaho. He has a spring, and he bottles it, and it's fancy. It's spiritually charged and has silicone. It does all these things, and they sell it for $12 a bottle at Erewhon. But he said, the carbon footprint to move that water around is considerable. So we were looking at a local artisanal bottled spring water that for the community that could be driven 2 blocks to the supermarket or Erewhon is something to consider. It's complex, and we talked about the actual process of bottling and what it would take. Something to think about. And then there's also the concern. A lot of the native communities say, "No, this is sacred. This is, we have to respect it." But for me, I think what's more respectful than imbibing this water and drinking this water? Everything is sacred. Also, the natives, they were business people. they were exchanging goods. I'll give you some abalone, give me a deer skin, I'll give you some water. So I think there's an argument to be made. The question, who owns the water? Well, in our lease agreement, 30 years old, it says we own the surface waters, the foundation that is controlling, that has the rights to opt to maintain the springs. So it's something to look at. But once again, then you have these bottles moving around, but you'd save a lot of transport costs if you like that sort of. Now I'm not drinking bottled water. It's Santa Monica residents. I drink it unfiltered. Look at me, for many years. But it's something to consider. It would be, I think, a beautiful project, entrepreneurial, to show the next generation how to really work with this incredible element. And because bottled water is so popular now, if we did it in a way without plastic, glass bottles, maybe you could recycle them. But it seems like quite a process to do that.
There's actually a movement in Europe and other parts of the world doing that. They're essentially creating these taps, and they sell these bottles that you go and refill with that bottle. I think one of the city staff sent me a link when they went to Amsterdam, they saw something like that. I could send you that as part of the movement.
Well, who's been to Rome? I mean, okay, you go to Rome and a lot of Italy, they have public spouts that are continuously flowing with water, and you just go and have a drink like that. Nobody's asking where this comes from and why is this not treated. And it's been like that for a couple thousand years. I mean, talking about the Roman aqueducts, they're very impressive. Some of them are still bringing water right to the middle of the city. And I don't think they treat it. I don't know if they treat it upstream at the springs or if it's just a natural flow of water. We'll get into that. You don't want to know too much.
I think the difference, one of the lady asked earlier too, is because if it gets in our hands, a municipality, our regulation is so different, we can't serve it to our public as a spring. Even though I completely agree, it's perfectly safe. I drank that water. It's better than a lot of the water sources out there. It's natural.
Thank
but
you.
when you turn over the municipality, unfortunately, we have to comply with all these regulations and provide treatment whether or not it's in there or not. So we actually have one well that's only disinfected with chlorine and send the system. It's in our in the San Vicente area. So that's probably the purest water that we have. It's about 200 feet deep, but that part of the aquifer is because it's closest to the natural recharge from the mountains.
Yeah.
And also historically there's been no industries in that area as well. It's kind of like with the map you were showing on the left side where all the residential were. So a lot of our problems were caused by us.
Industry, yeah. And somebody asked about springs. There were lots of springs along, throughout different parts of this region. Has anyone been to Rodeo Drive or know about that place? Okay, it was the original name was Rodeo de las Aguas, which was the rounding of the waters, and there were several springs that would coalesce there. And that was another major native village. And the problem with springs and development is it's a problem. If you're building a house, you don't want a spring. You want to just dig a ditch, get it into the storm drain, dry it out. There are springs down at the bottom of the Santa Monica Canyon, Rustic Canyon. Brook Tree is the name of that's a giveaway, Brook Tree. And a very prominent architect named Ray Cappy bought a piece of land and built a house, and he went, oh my God, there's a spring. They're in the water. So he built concrete towers and floated his house above it. It's an iconic, beautiful house. But I was also always disappointed that he didn't use the spring water, in a more interesting way. It's a problem when you're a builder or a developer. Water can be an enemy for a builder. For a gardener, water is your friend.
Well, I think it definitely changes how we harness our traditional water supply, I'll say. Not just the atmospheric river, but just climate change as a whole. Right, for us, like our project, we try to capture as much as we can, but there's only so much infrastructure we could build. The challenge with that is the rain comes so intense in such a short amount of time. We have a fixed 3 million gallons. We could only capture so much and process so much at a time.
You don't know how it's seeping into the aquifer?
No, so the other challenge is that because it's so intense, a lot of it just washes out. We need actually moderate, gentle rain to recharge. Those heavy rains, it just keeps going, right? The other problem we have, if you look at our state water project, where we rely on a lot of snowpack and that to melt, go into river lakes, then it makes all the way down here. The challenge of climate change with those wildfires, a lot of that soil becomes bone dry. And that water, when it rains, it just goes nowhere. It just hits the soil and it goes to the dry soil, and that's it. It doesn't go in the groundwater table. It doesn't end up in rivers or lakes. So I think it was a couple of years ago, it was wet. They thought, okay, we're like 70, 80% of normal. We should be good. 2 months later, it came back like, oh, we're 30% normal, and none of it made it into the, only I think 40% made it into lakes and rivers, to our traditional water supply. But so what I'm getting at is we have to rethink of how we capture the water supply, because how we've been doing it for, last 50, 80 years is changing, right? So projects like SWIP, even though it's small, it's a start, right? We're trying to set an example for others. We're paving the way on regulation. We had to negotiate a lot of regulations so other entities could start implementing those type of projects as well. So, somebody's got to be the first is sort of the model the city has taken. Unfortunately, well, I wouldn't say they're useless. You look at LA, they capture a lot and spread it into the groundwater. They're actually at peak capacity, I believe. They couldn't capture anymore. They have massive amount of spreading basins. They were full at capacity, right? So what we have and what we thought was like the severe storms is all changing too, right? So we have to rethink. This is the great thing I enjoy about engineering. We have to come up with new solutions to solve these problems, right? And that's what I joke, it keeps me employed. So there's new problems to solve. So part of that is what Bob was getting at. You have to capture your runoff here. So probably when they built the library upgraded, you're required to capture that. That cistern, it depends on what you want to do with it. Primarily, you can only irrigate with that water. There's some treatment requirements if you want to use it for like toilet flushing or other things. You have to treat it on site, which I don't think we have. We just have the capture mechanism to then use it later for some irrigation outside. That's about it. And that's really the challenge of regulation. I think we were focused on dealing with like the forever chemicals. Before that, it was Chrome 6. There were just a lot of things coming down the pipeline, and stormwater regulation was supposed to be developed last year, and it's getting pushed out because of other challenges we're facing that's more, of a higher priority, I think, in the industry.
Well, this Saturday is the first Saturday of the month, and we open to the public. Everybody's welcome to come and visit the Springs. We're open from 10 to 3. And please come, visit. It's a very interesting spiritual and communal place where you'll get to meet all kinds of people in the community. Also on May 18th, I can make this announcement, we're having our first big celebration of the gathering at Kuruvungna. We used to do Life Before Columbus for many years, every year a big event, festival. It was paused because of the pandemic. We're bringing it back. We're going to have Tongva dancers. Chief Anthony's going to give a sage blessing. We'll have some local politicos making speeches. Kids are welcome. We're putting together the food. It's a complex, to manage this event, but it's going to be a lot of fun. Put that in your calendar, May 18th. From 10 to 3. Gates open at 10. And then we're going to have a festival at the water treatment plant. No? Coming up pretty soon?
I'm still planning. We got to finish the project first. We got to kick me on down, Bob. I guess a parting thought. First, I want to thank you guys for coming, for being interested. For me, the more we talk about, the more that I could share facts and info to our residents is very meaningful for me, right? I just need to convince. My job is to convince one person, two person that tap water is safe. Don't drink bottled water. That's a big thing. For me, the other is I'll throw some present for Debra's event she's planning for us on May 19th. The We Are Essential event to celebrate and kick off our Public Works Week. Come check it out. We have the water on site to taste to see if you guess the difference between bottled water, our tap water, and our purified water, right? So.
Taste test.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Sunny. And we'll also, the whole day is really celebrating essential workers and the natural systems that we rely upon. So it's really trying to make this connection between not just the kind of, the people power and the infrastructure that keeps a city running, but also the waterways that we rely upon, the kind of natural systems that we extract from in order to be able to live in a developed city. So we'll have the Santa Monica Youth Orchestra playing, and Carmack, who's the poet laureate of Santa Monica, will be with us. We're doing this blind water tasting. It's basically just like a day to share space and honor essential workers and essential waterways. So hope you'll join us, and definitely visit the Springs if you haven't. It's really magical. Thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you, Deborah.